GI or not GI? That is the question. Or adapting it to the issue of this panel, producer groups or no producer groups? That is the question. A warm welcome to you wherever you are in front of your screens here in panel 3, Empowering Producer Groups. My name is Christian Jochum, and I will accompany you through the next 60 minutes. My role is to keep the time and to enable questions and a lively exchange of experience and views. I'm assisted by the pilot officer, Branka Tome. Welcome, Branka. She is deputy head of the quality unit at DG Agri. I am working for the Austrian Chamber of Agriculture as an expert for the food chain. I developed quality programs for several commodities and I moderated the founding of the Austrian Service Association for GIs. And besides, I'm chairman of the Working Party on Food Quality at Copa-Cogeca, the European organization for 22 million farms and 22,000 cooperatives. What is it about in this panel? A special part of my job are GIs. I believe in the economic usefulness and strategic effect of product differentiation through quality. And GIs are on top of the quality pyramid. Quality begins at the bottom of the chain at the primary level. This is why we are highlighting the role of producer groups. How can we strengthen producer groups? How can they play a more important role within the GI system? How can they contribute to the regional identity? It's my ambition and the challenge for the presenters to provide by their very specific examples useful information to you. I'm sure that you will find insights and aspects which you can implement into all kinds of structural organizations, irrespectively of the commodity, the history, the country, or the size of the GI product. Firstly, we start with the presentation of two well-known, so to say, old and big GIs of Parmigiano, Reggiano, and of Cognac. May I introduce to you Mr. Riccardo Deserti. He is director of the Consorzio del Formaggio Parmigiano Reggiano. He is on top of a well-functioning structure. What his experience is and his recommendations to you, we will hear in the next 10 to 12 minutes. If you have any questions or contributions during the lecture, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. My pilot officer will collect and sort them and forward them to me after the presentations. As time manager, I will watch my watch. After 10 minutes, I will give a polite sign. After 12 minutes, a distinct sign. And after 14 minutes, I will unmute the micro. No, I'm just kidding. Riccardo, the floor is yours.
Okay, I please the technical side to launch my presentation. I cannot see the PowerPoint presentation, please. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for a little delay. First of all, I thank the European Commission for the invitation. And in my speech, I'll show you some experiences from the Parmigiano Reggiano group and at the end, some proposal for the future. We start from the actual situation in Europe. Now, today, in European Union, doesn't exist a unique model of group, according to the Article 45 of Regulation 1151. We have at the level of single national countries some typologies that reflect the history and the difference in the basic systems. And if we look inside Italy, France, Spain, in every member state, there are huge differences between groups of different GIs. So, summing up, the European GI system to achieve the objectives of the regulation, in my opinion, needs to strengthen the role and the powers of GI groups. Now, the question is how to empower this role. Sorry, but the slide is not running. Oh. Okay, thank you very much. How to empower this role? The starting point is that we cannot empower if we work on inadequate structures. Only a strong and representative group can support the weight and responsibility of strong powers. And in this way, the key factor is the membership inside the group. And the real difference inside the group starts from the economic participation at the GI groups. Without the direct investment of GI producer, the strategic and operative management of the group is forced to fail. This is the starting point from our experience. And please change the slide. And this evaluation drive our discussion to the basic dilemma. The dilemma is that to support this new role that that is our target, we need a balance. The balance between legal power, and we are looking for new European and national rules. We need the representativeness and participation inside the group. To give some answer, I show very briefly some suggestions from the experience we made in the management of the new tool about the supply regulation plan that we introduced in our system. Please change the slide. We introduced it in 2014. Please. Oh, thank you. Which are the pillars of our supply regulation plan? We adopted a system based on a milk quota assignment to all the breeders involved in Parmigiano Reggiano production. And we introduced an economic contribution, an additional contribution on the calculated on the exceeding quantity that overcome the quota. The money that we obtain from the application of the plan are reinvested totally in the market development action, because the target is the equilibrium between supply and demand. And we invested this money in marketing and communication. Which is the amount of these resources? In the budget for the next year, we have 52 million euros, including additional and ordinary funds. You have to consider that this amount, a very relevant amount of money, is around 3% of the total dairy turnover, and this is the way to size the participation of our producer. Inside of this total budget, the share from the additional funds for the management plan is around the 45%. If these are the pillars of the plan, which are the main results after 6 years of application? Please change the slide. After 6 years, we show two different kinds of results. The direct impact on supply, the main target, we obtained a slowed production. The average growth during this period, 2014-19, is a little bit less than 3% by year. without the plan, we would have suffered certainly an excess of supply with significant impacts on income. And the evaluation, the direct economic evaluation is good. But we obtained also secondary impacts from our approach to the plan. First of all, please change the slide. First of all, a target, a goal is related to the role of the group, because during the application of this plan, our group become a pivot of the plan, and I say of all the Parmigiano Reggiano supply chain. The agreement quorum, you have to consider that to start with the plan, we need to obtain the sign on the agreement from the 66% at least from the breeders and all the dairies. It's very complex, this approach for the group to obtain this every 3 years. But today we can say that this approach is essential to give strong foundation to the plan and also to improve the role of our group. Another secondary target, please change the slide, we achieve is the impact of the approach of milk quotas, because now the quota system become an heritage and pride. Heritage because the total value at the current market value of the quota is more than 1.5 billion euros of heritage that is own property of the breeders. But on the other side, also a pride, because each breeder has an own Parmigiano quota and is an asset, is a kind of identity card. The breeders now are a core ring of Parmigiano Reggiano chain, and now as group we benefit of this close connection to improve new strategic programs in PDO chain. And for example, we are working very strong on the animal welfare program. So coming back, please change the slide. Coming back to the balance, what was the target is, in my opinion, the direction. We need to improve the role of producer by the way of GIs, and we need to drive very with attention the increase in legal power step by step, with an increase of representativeness and participation. So moving to the conclusion, some proposal and some message to the group. In my opinion, looking from our experience, we need to improve some rules and some proposal on the regulation side to improve the role of the groups. Please change the slide. It's possible to drive the assignment of specific powers to the groups to define binding rules for producer or only some categories included in the control system. For example, some rules and powers including the contracts, the marketing approach, the packaging or marketing regulation. And we need to define this kind of role over the formal specification of the PDO or PGI. A vision in this way could be the extension of some of the roles of organized producer on Regulation 13.8 of 2013 to GI groups. In this work, thinking about the balance, the need of balance, is that not all the groups are the same and suitable for the power. We need to define together a way to modulate new powers under a classification of the group in relation to their ability to be operational and representative. And in conclusion, from what we ask to the European and government is we can try to put on the table of the tools, new tools for the international legal protection of denomination. A long way we run on the base of information and promotional programs, but to build in the long term the economic development of PDO and PGI, another tool we need is to support directly the legal action around the world to protect our name, but under the name, the supply chain and economic chain. Concluding, please change to the last slide. SGIs, I ask some proposal for the government and European Union, but we cannot only expect the step of the other. We need, as groups, in steps ahead. We have a new challenges in this vision. The key of these challenges is the representation, and the empowerment passes from involvement. And I stress the concept is involvement in terms of economic involvement on direct producers. If we are a good example, a best practice example as Parmigiano Reggiano, I believe that the first pillar is that we obtain a direct, relevant participation in economic terms from our producers. This is the better link with the supply chain. So it's necessary to frame the GI groups, not so much for the legal or corporate characteristics, but for the economic role that the groups are able to express based on the mandate, a clear and strong mandate of the supply chain linked to the GI. So, dear Christian, I believe I respect the time you assigned. I hope to receive other questions and to improve our discussion. Thank you, and thank you at all.
Thank you, Riccardo, for the interesting insight into your consortium. So it's what you mentioned all about the economic role of your consortium. With the economic benefit of managing the supply, you created identity and identification. And this was only possible by attributing power to the producer. Thanks a lot again, and also for keeping the time. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to pose a question at this stage of the program, please use again the question and answer function, because next we listen and watch another amazing story, that of Cognac. Similarly to the situation of Parmigiano Reggiano, we will find a clear structure with an economic focus. Welcome, Mr. Lionel Lalagüe. He is actually in his at home office close to the city of Cognac. You are Director of Public and International Affairs at the Bureau National Interprofessionnel du Cognac. We are looking forward to your presentation, how the Dénomination d'Origine Contrôlée Cognac is structured, and what are your messages to us. The rules to keep the time are the same than for Riccardo. Lionel, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you very much, Riccardo, for your first presentation. And thank you very much for the DG Agri and EU IPO for inviting me for this very interesting presentation and this panel of empowering producer. What I will present to you in the first part of my presentation is the structuration of Cognac, which is of interest because it's quite singular. Cognac is per se a unique product, and you will see how. I will develop really shortly to summarize this point. But because of this unique product, we create a singular organization that drives us through some kind of success on the export markets, as we can see today. And I will end with some food for thought, some proposals that can be analyzed in order to know if there are some tools, some ideas that can be used in order to better develop the concept and that can be used for other GI orders. So Cognac is a unique product. Why is it unique? First of all, because we will have two feet indeed. The first one is CMO. We depend for the wine grapes of regulation EU 1308/2013. So for this vineyard of today about 80,000 hectares, so you can see on the map, grapes are harvested only in this delimited area and made into wine in respect of common market organization. We have to respect these rules, and it's an important pillar of our legal security. The second pillar is the spirit drinks regulation, because after producing wine, we will double distill it in copper pot still and age it during 2 years in oak vessels. These requirements and prescriptions are written in regulation EU 2019/787 for the new regulation that's going to be in force in April next year. So this is really important because we have these 2 feet, and this is of real interest because that gives you tools, but that gives you also requirements to respect. So you have to respect that, and you have to be in a position to respect that. Next, yep. So as regards the organization of BNIC, what our members think is that we are here to, we are a place where forces are joined to serve the Cognac economic development within the respect of the appellation. This is something really important, respect of the appellation on one side and economic development on the other side, just like Christian told you and Riccardo just before. This is a very, very important point. We represent 270 merchants, trade houses, as we call them, 4,300 wine growers, and also boilers. Some of them are professional distillers that can distill for other producers, and some of them are home distillers. They distill their own production. These represent the members of BNIC. We have 3 main missions. Traditionally, and from the very beginning of the interbranch, we have public service missions on behalf of the French customs, what we call DGDDA. It's monitoring Cognac movements, monitoring aging registers, and issuing Cognac certificates. As you know, Cognac being an aging spirit, it gives value thanks to the aging, and it's been a long, long time ago that control authorities in the EU, but also in third countries' markets, required a very strict control of this aging, because that can be something important for consumers. Or if it's not, that could be misleading. So very important. This is the very heart of the mission of BNIC. The second mission is more classical interbranch missions. It's understand, defend, and promote the GI, organize the production and respond to market requirements, facilitate market access. As you will see, it's important because we export 98% of the production, 98, so very, very important for us. And of course, something very, very important, which is implementing a research and sustainable development policy. BNIC is based on the former work that was done by technical institute, in particular on wine and distillation. So very, very important, this work on the research and sustainable development policy. And of course, we have also control, in particular downstream control. The last mission that was given to BNIC in 2010 is what we call Organisme de Défense et de Gestion in France, or Defense and Management Body, DNB. That gives us a very, very interesting power, because we have the power to write the product specification and, in link with the certification body, implement the control plan. So very, very wide set of missions that allow us to be able to act on all the aspects of the product. The governance of BNIC really reflects that. It's based on parity. We represent 2 colleges, the trade houses colleges and the wine growers colleges. And thanks to that, we really work for that representation, for this parity to be highlighted in all the cells of the interbranch, whether it's a plenary assembly, the standing committee. Every time we have a parity between the two colleges, and this is something very critical in the way to build a consensus and build a common approach and a common objective on where we have to go together. We have a particular statute because indeed within the interbranch we have the DMB. That's why we have a presidency for the DMB and we have a presidency for the interbranch. For the interbranch, it's 3 years a trade house representative, 3 years wine growers. For the DMB, it's always wine growers. So very, very important, this parity. Thanks to this organization, we are today in a situation where we have an export-led growth. Indeed, we are exported, as I told you before, in 98% of the production in 160 countries. The turnover is something a little more than 3 billion euros. As you can see on the map, we really depend on the North American market, which is really important for us. Fastest being the second one, with qualities different, more young qualities on the North American market and more old qualities on the Far East. Europe is still a very, very important market for us, really traditional one. But we see also the development in other countries, such as in Oceania or in Africa. Thanks to that, indeed, we know that following the latest Intel, we have something about 60,000 people in France living from the cognac industry and 17,000 direct jobs thanks to cognac. Now I would like to put some elements for discussion, because if we take our example, which is just an example, and as we discussed with Christian, the idea is not to copy paste because I think it will be a failure, but clearly to try to understand what can work on what can be used in order to help all GI holders in the way to manage their GI. First of all, I would like to highlight the permanent dialogue between production and trade. This is really, really critical in order to build the second point, which is a shared vision of the long-term development of the GI within the world chain. Production and trade dialogue so that they have a common vision and a shared vision. And it's a vision not of the short term, it's a vision of the long term. What happens tomorrow or in 3 months or in 2 years, where are we going in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years? Where will we be? That's a critical point. I already said that the parity in the decision-making process is very important so that everybody knows that his weight is the same. There is a balance. Parity is really, really important. Of course, and Riccardo already told you, appropriate financing is very, very important because you cannot do anything if you are not sufficiently financed. This is something important. And thanks to an organization, we are financed both by production and trade. Of course, in order to monitor production, you need to have appropriate management tools. This management tool, as included in regulations, must be in a position to help you monitor production and help develop this sustainable development. Of course, you need to respect the product specification. It's quite logical, but it's really important because strict respect of product specification and effective GI protection mean that when a consumer builds your product, you know that it builds a standard of quality, which is always a very high standard. If it does not add this standard of quality, this is misleading, and this is something that can weaken the fame and the notoriety that has been built during centuries. So very, very important to respect product specification and ensure effective GI protection. If we take the example of cognac, that may not be the case for other products, but for us it's really important. We have strong brands that promote the category on the market. And this is very useful because they know the consumers, because they have local guys, and because they have money. So it's also important to let people do what they are the best at. And clearly, we have very good people on the market, promoting the brands, and that will help drive the whole category. Of course, the question of balance between cost of production and added value created is very important. You cannot expect something to be sustainable if you do not create enough added value. In particular, because GI costs a lot. Cognac costs a lot more than other spirit drink in the production process. Saint Christian. So if you don't have a sufficient added value, your model is not sustainable. And this added value must be really, really all along the chain, and not only for trade houses or not only for producers. It's for all the whole chain. And of course, that will result in local investment. And at the end, it's something which is also important. I would like to conclude on that. The role of authorities is very important, because responsible authorities are here to support the producers and not act in a coercive way. If you have all these elements, I'm really sure that you have some kind of recipe to help develop and ensure the success of the GIs in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lionel. Just a little bit to summarize for me personally what you presented to us. Thanks. As far as I have understood, the basis of your organization is also a solid economic growth, in the case of Cognac, with a clear focus on exports. And this is embedded in a structure which might look a little bit complicated, maybe due to its age, but which is what you mentioned, well balanced alongside the chain from the wine growers, the distillers, and the trade houses. Thank you again, and also for keeping the time. Ladies and gentlemen, in a physical conference, we would hear now applause. This is not possible in this electronical way. So let me, on behalf of you, dear audience, thank you to our keynote speakers, Lionel Lalagüe from Cognac and Riccardo Deserti from Parmigiano Reggiano, for their impressive presentations. Dear public, now it's up to you. So I will beforehand look at the collected questions and remarks we have received and which are forwarded from the pilot officer to me. Branka, what do we have in the chat box? So just one moment. What I have seen are there one or two questions concerning this confusion about the denominations between producer group, producer organization. So I just register that Branka is answering this to everybody, as she is the specialist at the administrative side. And there was another comment that in the case of wine, and that there they prefer interbranch organizations. So just to give you a personal experience from my side, my experience is everything which is well structured and well organized is good and is useful, may it be horizontal or a vertical structure. But maybe Lionel and or Riccardo, can you answer, or can you give us your experience or your comment on this concerning the terms, whether producer organization, producer group is confusing or not? Is it possible for a technician to?
Okay, Christian?
Okay. Yeah, Riccardo.
Yeah, no, I believe it depends on the different national point of view, because also the application of producer organization depend on national decree and application of European regulation. In my opinion, and we tried in Italy to start to speak about the opportunity to define the group like as the producer organization under the CMO. But under this discussion, it's very difficult to try to extend directly the regulation, the 13.8 to GI group. But what is important, in my opinion, is the content. We need this group to be in charge of specific role and powers. For example, the extension to groups for cheeses for the supply regulation plan is the correct approach to give us new powers under a direct way and not under the extension of the CMO producer organization that I believe should be difficult to extend in a harmonized system to all the countries. But we need to enforce the specific power, and we need to work, for example, on the prices and the commercialization approach of the geographical indication.
Yeah, but for this you need an official registration as producer organization, because otherwise you will get in conflict with the competition legislation. So the single CMO foresees special options for recognized POs to do some, like the supply of the management of the supply, some economic activities which normally would get in conflict with the competition legislation.
Yes, obviously, I believe that if we define this target, we need to write specific regulation to align this vision. But I believe under the omnibus package, we stated, also the European Union stated a clarification about the conflict between agricultural policies like these and the rules for competition. Obviously, we need to write some specific rule to extend these roles.
Okay. I have another question to Lionel. How difficult it is for Cognac to control and enforce the protection of the GI, so more the legal side. Lionel? Okay. Then we get, there is a problem with Lionel, so we go to the next question, two provocative questions. What about the ownership of GIs? What about mandatory membership to the GI body? I have a request from two persons from the audience. Maybe they can contribute to this question. So ownership of GIs, who is owning the GI? Is it the producer group as legal body? And what's about the mandatory membership? May I ask Sébastien Breton, maybe he can contribute to this question?
Yes. Good morning to all participants, and thank you for all organizers for this conference. I'm Sébastien Breton, General Secretary of the French Federation of PDO Dairy Products, and I coordinate the association Origin France. I have few comments directly related to the presentation of Riccardo Deserti and Lionel Lalagüe. And we propose few short points for better management of GIs by GIs producer groups. In first, it's necessary to strengthen the role and power of the GIs groups. Their role should in particular be reinforced with regard to supply regulation that should be extended to all types of PDO or PDI products, and strengthen advice and support to value chain actors for GI developments, as well as other cooperation activities. And trust the capacity and financial support GI producer group with providing specific supports to producer like sustainability assessment or other, and elaborating valorization strategies encompassing also related activities such as agritourism. GIS groups should have the possibility to implement specific programs for coordinated activities within their value chain. We would that future CAP strategic plans provide the right support for GIS producer groups, and in the context of rural development programs, but also sectorial programs, including financial aid for control and promotion activities.
Okay, thank you.
Also, yes,
this means you would demand for an empowering producer groups to become, so to say, to play a more important role by opening the actual rule to all commodities, because actually it's just limited to cheese and ham, and yes, it should be opened to all commodities to manage supply and so to say I would say to control the market, and as we have heard in the example of Riccardo, yes, that this works well and also contributes to the internal identification with the producer group.
Yes.
Now I have heard that Lionel is again back after solving these technical problems. Lionel, there is a comment from Anna Geiger from Germany, where she's, so to say, describing or complaining the situation that normally trade has the by far stronger position in the value chain than the supply. In your example, you mentioned or highlighted the equilibrium between the trade side and the production side. So could you tell us how this works in the daily life, in practice?
Thank you very much, Christian, and sorry once again for this technical problem. So yeah, of course, it's very important that there is balance. If it's not balanced, then there's something wrong, and it's not sustainable. I mean, the point of sustainability is really important. How is it enforced? I mean, we have grapes only coming from a delimited territory. They cannot be produced elsewhere. So producers, they have a weight. They gather, and their voice is a voice of people having the production in hands. And when they discuss with the trade houses, the balance is something that comes quite naturally. Why? Because they're not speaking about tomorrow or today or tomorrow. They're speaking about what do you see? Where do you think we will be in 10 years, in 15 years? We have developed a business plan in order to work on the past yields, stocks, and expected sales in the futures. Based on that, it allows us to know what is an appropriate yield, what planting do we need, and how we have to manage the production. This is really important because this is a tool, a very useful tool to get confidence between the two colleges, and also the production has a lot of influence on that, because thanks to the yield and thanks to the way we deal with the harvest, that will have a link on the price, and that will have a link on the quality of the product. If you produce quality products, you must receive the appropriate price for that. If it's not the case, then you have a problem, and once again, it's not sustainable.
Okay. So in the case of your GI, you have more, so to say, the focus on the vertical structure, like you also include an interbranch organization. And as far as I have understood, one of the benefits of such a structure is that you can do, so to say, the long-term strategic planning, where all parts of the chain are involved, can contribute, and may hopefully may also benefit from the outcome of this planning procedure. I have another question coming via Q&A. Should all producer groups be formally required to register as EU licensed producer organizations? As far as I know, actually, to be allowed to do this, the management of supply, you have to be formally registered, but for all other types, which are just, so to say, managing or organizing promotion or discussing the specification, there is actually no need. But I give the question back to you all and motivate you to contribute via the Q&A. What is your opinion? Do you think that we should mandatorily demand that all groups behind the GI have to be formally registered? Where maybe in practice we will have two levels, the national level and the EU level. Why not?
Yeah. Christian, can
Yes, Riccardo?
Yeah, only to try to link two different questions. This is a possible approach, but it depends how we merge this approach to producer group with the specific power. But about the intervention of Sébastien, and also the question about the ownership of GIs, we have to clear a possible confusion from GIs and as a name and the GI group. In our experience, is important the concept of the ownership of GI group. Speaking about the name, is a kind of a public name under the European rules. But if we build GI groups that provide specific services with relevant economic value, and we need to obtain a fund, direct private fund from the producer, irrelevant that the group become an economic player with shareholders, and the shareholders of this group with an private funding is that the shareholder need to be the producer directly, and so the producer has to be the owners, the ownership of the GI group. Concluding, in my opinion, the real vision of GIs, the difference between the CMO approach, that we don't need in advance a specific financial fish. We don't need in advance money from the agricultural policy. If we build specific rule with power to manage the market, the money for our services we will obtain from the producer, linked to us with the contract under the GI groups. This is the vision and the experience after also the experience of the supply plan that allow to us to the availability of new funding and new private funding to support the services.
Okay. So, but this is again with the indirect message, GI and the structure behind has, so to say, to earn money, because without economic goals and economic benefit, it will not work. I have another intervention from Carina Folkesson. She would like to contribute to our discussion. Carina.
Thank you very much, Christian. So yes, briefly introduce myself. I'm an independent consultant carrying out studies on behalf of the European institutions related to agriculture and agricultural policy. And I've done quite a bit of work related to GIs. And then thank you to Riccardo and Lionel for really interesting presentations that I enjoyed very much. And there are many, many interesting topics that we could pick up on. But it's one thing that we have not touched that much upon, I think, is, you know, in order to strengthen, from my point of view, in order to strengthen the role of GI producers, it's necessary to facilitate for GIs, producer groups, to combat unfair trading practices, to combat unfair trading terms imposed by downstream buyers. And all these, I think, also partly relates to how GIs are used as ingredients and how they can, it's one aspect of this, now how they're used as ingredients and how it's communicated to consumer that they are used as ingredients. And maybe a question to you, Riccardo, is that I understand in Italy, the Ministry of Agriculture has developed specific national rules related to the use of GIs as ingredients, where the third product or the final product needs to seek the agreement from the producer association or from the consortia to use the name in the final communication to the consumer. And from my understanding, that's unique for Italy. I think in France, it's built on there's a common approach, but it's not obligatory, for example. And I haven't really seen that in other member states. So I was wondering maybe if you could explain a bit more to us how that works, if you see benefits with it, or if it could be improved, and if you think there would be benefits in that case of expanding it on European level.
So thank you, Carina. May I beforehand just inform that in the so-called quality package of 2010, so it's, so to say, long ago, there is a small outcome, which is an official EU guideline how to use GIs in processed products, like special GI salami on a pizza, etc. So there are, so to say, there is a general recommendation from the EU side, and I'm not familiar with national additional rules, but just to mention, on the EU level, there exists an official document how to use a GI as an ingredient in processed products.
So just to develop on that, because I agree there are guidelines, but as you know, they are voluntary, first of all. And secondly, then there's a judgment from the Court of Justice that in the Champagne-Sauvé case, where actually they said that it's not unlawful to use the name of a GI if that is used as an ingredient and is the predominant taste to the final product. So it actually means that you could use it in the communication of other, selling other products.
Under certain conditions.
Under certain conditions, indeed. But I think that's where it's a gray zone, and that's why I was interested in hearing Riccardo's experience on that, how it's seen in Italy.
But maybe for me, the message of your intervention is that to what extent the producer organization behind the GI plays a role in deciding such examples as you mentioned, using GI as an ingredient, or combating counterfeit or fraud, etc. Because
Exactly.
we have always the conflict between the public protection ex officio and on the other side the private activities from the producer groups, where from my point of view the successful GIs do both. They do not only rely on the public controls, they do with their own money and their own lawyers and traditions try to prevent counterfeit and fraud. And
exactly. It's to what extent actually GI holders would be on equal footing to trademark holders and can enter into private contracts with processors wishing to use the GI as an ingredient.
Okay. I have a very short question. Thank you, Karina. I have to watch the time. There was one aspect mentioning the bureaucracy. Of course, we know GI and red tape is a pair. I would summarize. I think we have seen that the structure behind the GI is very important. There are many questions concerning, so to say, the horizontal or more the vertical dimension of the structure. We have received questions concerning to what extent these structures are officially recognized or whether or not they are contributed powers by the legislator. As tomorrow we have another panel, it's panel 5 in session. It's panel 2 in session 5, which starts tomorrow at 10:45. I will provide and prepare a short introduction for tomorrow with all of these valuable contributions from you, dear viewers and participants. I would, for today, for this panel, conclude. We have seen examples that successful GIs are, amongst other things, economically successful. That's one of the bases. Economic success depends on good structures. And producer groups are good structures. And this applies both to big and to small GIs. So Lionel and Riccardo, again, thank you for your very interesting and valuable contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you for tomorrow. And now I invite you to head again for the final plenary meeting of today. Thank you and goodbye. See you hopefully tomorrow.
Thank you, Christian.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.